Okay, good afternoon. Today we are continuing with those algebraic expressions. We are working on PO18. I can solve two-step equations. We've been doing one step, now we're doing two steps. So we're adding another step to it. Solving an equation with two steps is merely building off the last two objectives and combining the two ideas. It's at this point we move away from fact families since there's more than one operation in the equation. And because our equations are more complex, using logic alone is difficult. So we are going to focus on using opposite operations. Okay, so we've gotten comfortable doing the one step. Now we're going to use that opposite operations to really work on both steps. In the equation we see above, we see there are two operations. We have 5n plus 7 equals 32. So we have 7 being added to 5 times n. So we've got one operation here and one operation here. And the opposite of addition we know is subtraction, and the opposite of multiplication is division. Remember, opposite operations we need to cancel out, and we want to get that variable by itself, so we have to do the opposites. Here is where you need to be careful. When solving for a variable, there is an order that must be followed. The opposite of PERMDAS. Oh my goodness, I've been drilling it, that order of operations. Now we're doing it the opposite way. We must work backwards because we are undoing the equation to solve for the variable. So it's the opposite of PERMDAS, which would be SADMRA. So we're going to go backwards. Not as easy to say. As when solving for any variable, plug your solution into the original equation and make sure it works. We've talked about this last couple of days. Always take the answer you come up with, put it in the equation, and see if that's the answer is correct. If you put that variable in, you should have a true equation on there. So let's erase this and we will work on a couple together. Of course, it doesn't want to scroll up for me. Why won't it scroll? Now I can scroll. Okay, so let's look at some of our practice work. Five n plus 7 equals 32. What's the first step I want to do? First step, Izzy. Because remember, we have PERMDAS, but we're changing it around and going backwards. So we want to do this first, then this, then this, then that. Am I going to add? Remember, we are trying to get the n by itself. If we want the variable alone, we're in the backward state of mind. Yeah, we're going to do the opposite. So we're going to subtract our 7 out. So 32 minus 7 is 25. 7 minus 7 cancels itself out. So now we have 5n equals 25. What's my next step? What am I going to do next? I canceled out 7 minus 7, so that's 0. Paisley, what do I do next?
Divide 5 by 25.
I'm going to divide by 5. Because 5n is multiplying 5 times n. So I want to do the opposite. I want to divide it. 5 divided by 5 is 1, so that's just the n. 25 divided by 5 is 5. So then we want to put our answer in for that variable to see if we were correct. So we have 5 times 5 plus 7 equals 32. So 5 times 5 is 25 plus 7. 25 plus 7? is 32. It works.
Yay.
Always take your answer and plug it back into the equation to double check your work. Maddie,
So, how would you do that as second?
we're not. Remember up top I said this doesn't work with fact families. We're moving away from it.
Okay.
Now we're just focusing on the opposite operations because it gets too complicated when we have multiple operations in there. So that's why we're doing the opposites now.
So, if I were to do this one.
I don't know which one is this one.
Sorry, the next one.
This one, 2n?
Yeah, I would do, minus 2 for 25 minus.
Careful,
Or plus 2.
careful. What is 2n?
It's multiplying.
What was that called?
It's multiplying.
It's multiplying. When we have a number right next to the variable, it means you're multiplying them. So remember, we're doing PermDes backwards. So our first thing is going to be looking for any adding or subtracting. So I'm not going to worry about the 2n yet because that's a multiplying. I want to look at that plus 7, or sorry, plus 17. So how do I clear out plus 17? What's the opposite? Minus 17. What I do to one side of the equal sign, I'm going to do to the other side of the equal sign. So 17 minus 17, I get a 0. So I can just cancel that out. 25 minus 17 gives me 8. So I'm going to rewrite, just like when we do order of operations, rewrite what we have. 2n equals 8. Now I'm going to solve for my n. I can get n by itself. If I have 2n, what's the opposite? Sam?
Divided.
Dividing by 2. Because 2n is multiplying it by 2. So I want to divide by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I can just call that n. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that would be my n. I always want to double check it. So 2 times my n plus 17 equals 25. So I want to do multiplying before adding now because now I'm doing PermDes the correct way. So 2 times 4 is 8 plus 17 equals 25. 8 plus 17 is 25 equals 25. So this is a correct. It's true. Sam, did you have a question?
No, I figured it out.
Okay, Leah.
So I don't forget
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Look at the 8.
So let's look. We're going to look at this one right here. So n over negative 6 minus 4 equals a negative 15. So let's look at our steps. First, we need to understand what components we have in our equation. Is this the part that's giving you a hard time, Leo?
Well, I got negative 11.
What steps did you do?
Well, I subtracted 4 from the
Why are we subtracting 4? Were we adding 4 in the original equation?
yeah.
So you always want to do the opposite. So if this says minus 4, we're going to add 4 to zero them out. So we add 4 over here. So if we have negative 15 plus 4, we get negative 11. And we have n over negative 6 equals negative 11. So if we're dividing, remember this is a dividing line. That fraction line means divide. So if we were dividing, now we want to multiply by 6. So 6, multiply by 6, and then divide by 6. They cancel each other out. And we want to do the same thing on the other side of our equal sign. So we have n by itself now equals negative 11 times 6 is negative 66.
Yeah, that was.
So let's plug in negative 66 and see if that's correct.
Yeah.
So we're going to do negative 66 over negative 6 minus 4 equals negative 15. So if we have, oh, silly Mrs. Gambino. This is a -6 right here, so we have to do a -6 there and there. Oh, Mrs. Gambino. Silly, simple mistakes like that get us the wrong answer. If I'm dividing by a -6, I have to multiply by a -6. So negative times a negative, our answer should be a +66. It is that important that we pay attention to those negative signs. If we're multiplying or dividing by a negative, you have to multiply or divide by the negative. So we have 66 divided by -6 gives us a -11 minus 4 equals -15. -11 minus 4 is -15. So +66 is our answer. Edward. Yeah, talk louder.
Pretty much stacked families, the logic is
Not for nothing. It's building it up and getting you ready for it. Being able to do fact families helps. Okay, you have to understand it gives you more of a number sense. But now we're getting more complicated, so we're going to just the opposite operations. Naveen.
How does -9 minus 9 and
Yeah, that was what I'm struggling.
All right, let's walk through that one. So what's the first thing we're going to do? -9 minus 10n equals 41. What would be the first thing we should do? Add 9. Because we're subtracting 9. -9 means -9. So we're going to add 9 to each side. So we're going to zero that out. -9 plus 9 is 0. Then we have -10n equals 41 plus 9 is 50. You see where we're going now?
yeah,
We have -10n. What's the opposite? Divide. Because -10 is multiplying by the end, so we want to divide by that -10. So divide by the -10. That's going to give us the n alone. 50 divided by -10 gives us a -5. So let's plug it in and see if we did that right. So -9 minus 10 times -5 equals 41. First thing I'm going to do is my multiplying. 10 times -5 is -50. -9 minus -50 equals 41. Remember, when we're doing the subtracting a negative, you're adding the positive. -9 plus 50 equals 41. So you have to take it one step at a time. And once you figure out your first step, then you're able to see a little bit easier what the answer is going to be. Sometimes they look complicated. Just stop, take a breath, and figure out what's my first step. Okay. Yep. Nathan.
So why with the -9, why would you add it by just 9?
Well, it's -9. What's the opposite of -9? +9. So we're just doing opposites. Opposite of -9. We talked about this quite a few objectives ago. The opposite, remember the opposite values that we did when we were doing absolute values? So the opposite of a +5 is a -5. The opposite of -9 is a +9. We want to zero it out. So if we were to look at that number line, here's 0. We're at -9 here. That is 9 away from 0. We're at +9. It's 9 away from 0. We want to zero out on the side that has the variable. So we want this to become a 0. So whatever we do to this side, then we have to do it to the other side of that equal sign. So you're always trying to zero out when it's just those whole numbers like that. Did that make sense, Nathan? Okay. All right, I am going to stop the recording right now so we can have a good amount of work time for when these questions pop up. My friends at home are going to have a wonderful afternoon.